Okay, second to last session of the conference. So I want to do this talk on state of performance. This is a talk that I used to do every year, and so I think I'm going to make it a tradition at Velocity of doing this. And so the idea here is, I think this is the San Francisco Symphony, and so they're having an awesome performance. So I want to talk, so in this talk I want to try to maybe take a higher perspective of where we are when it comes to web performance, what people can do, and what we might see in the future. So let's talk about the past year. So I think the first three items kind of capture what the year's been like. We saw Chrome from Google, and I think that really has done what its goal was to try to raise the bar when it comes to browsers for performance. I think we helped push the envelope, and already though there was a lot of competition within the browser market that's been developing. And so another thing we saw was tremendous improvement in JavaScript engines with WebKit's Squirrelfish and TraceMonkey from Mozilla and Chrome's V8. And another area where we saw growth when it came to browsers, although it's certainly not a perfect world right now, are benchmarks. So we saw Dromeo, and V8 has a benchmark, and SunSpider. And then there are a few other things, although I would say, certainly if I had to describe the past year, I would call it the year of the browser. But I want to do a call out for Smush It. I think Nicole and Stoyan are still here. And Smush It itself is really powerful, but the other thing that it does is it really helped raise more focus on optimizing images. It might seem like a little simpler. It doesn't involve coding, but it is something that can have a tremendous impact. Stoyan did an Ignite talk where he said, basically most websites, 50% of what they download is images. So if you can make a dent in that, it's going to make a big improvement. About a month ago, YSlow 2.0 came out, and about a week or two ago, PageSpeed came out. So these and other tools, we saw tools today where they're basically performance-linked tools. And the more help that developers can get for identifying problems and how to fix them, I'm all for that. Doug's book, JavaScript, The Good Part. And this is really kind of a proxy for other efforts that are made, conferences and books and training for evangelizing best practices, especially in this area. I've talked about how this is a kind of recent industry that's developing around performance and front-end development and web development, and it's kind of unstructured right now. So we need to somehow try to figure out how to bring some structure to that and establish a more formalized training program to this area. And I'll throw out Velocity too. I think that establishing a community for people interested in web performance is really necessary, and we're seeing that grow, and Jesse and I will keep trying to throw more ideas into how to sustain this, maybe in between the annual conference itself. But I wanted to call bullshit a little bit. I hate to say it, but the emperor is naked. So I just want to ask you, when you're surfing around, how does the web feel to you? Does it feel like this? Or does it feel like this? Right? So what's this web page like? This is pretty much like my experience. It's kind of unbalanced. I've got one guy who's not even watching where we're going. It looks to me like their tools are pretty inconsistent and out of date. And but of course, right up in the front, we have ads where they're selling their CDs. So that's the thing that we want to make sure is the most prominent thing on the site. I don't want to sound too negative, but we've made a lot of improvements, but we're talking like 10%, 20%, maybe 50% improvements in web performance. And we heard Marissa talk today about this vision of making surfing the internet like turning pages in a magazine. If we think about it, we're probably like an order of magnitude away from achieving that. So, what are we going to do about that? So one thing is, most of what I do is focusing on, trying to get on my soapbox and convince individual companies and development teams and developers to adopt these best practices and toe the line and fight the fight. And when I'm out there and I look at a lot of websites and talk to a lot of different companies and teams, I kind of see, I would describe kind of these 4 reasons why the web and websites are still slow. One is, I see often that people who own websites and build websites aren't really even aware that their website is slow. And I think everyone here, that's not the case, but I just want to throw this out there, that often you might be encountering a team, or if you're a consulting company or something like that, you'll encounter teams that don't really have an awareness of how fast or slow their website is. Maybe they might know it's slow, or when they find out it's slow, they then don't know what part of their website is slow. Is it front end or back end? If it's back end, is it database or web services? If it's front end, is it JavaScript or images? What should I do? So then the next step is kind of where the why slows come in, is, okay, so I kind of know my problem area, I know where to focus a little bit, but I really don't have any clue of how I'm supposed to fix this problem. Can you give me some help? So that's, we can get past that. We can get to where websites realize they're slow, they know what's slow on their site, and they know how to fix it, and then they hit the final hurdle, where they can't get that bug assigned and prioritized so that it's for the next release. It's always for the release after the next release. And then when you get to the next release, it's always for the release after that one, right? And this might be a generalization. I think as developers, we like to, generalize the relationship between, product development and marketing and performance improvements as a battle like this, where we're constantly having hurdles put in front of us. And in some cases that's true. The other, I say, can't here. In other cases, we're prevented from making performance improvements because of the state of technology. We might be using a web server that makes it impossible or extremely difficult to do what we want to do. Or, of course, we're hindered by browsers in doing what we want to do for all of our users. And even in the protocols, there are limitations. So I just wanted to touch on each of these a little bit and offer up some comments and things that exist and can be done. One thing I'd like to see when it comes to performance, how speed, is I'd like to see a publicly available data warehouse that had the load times and comparisons across all websites on the internet. And I think one thing we need to do to get more website measurements available is to make it easier. It's just too hard right now for some middle tier company out there, or even larger companies, to get accurate load time, response time measurements of their web pages. And even here I've seen really big companies get up and say, oh, well, what we've done is we've only measured from the top of the page to the onload event. And if you think about it, that's a pretty a rough way to measure the load time of your page. So we didn't include the server time, and the onload time might really have no relationship to the user experience, with the user perception of the load time. So we need to do some work here. Another thing I'd like to see is, getting data from real users is the most important thing to have, the most valuable. You need other types of measurements as well. And so something I'd like to see here is something along the Alexa line, where maybe we can get Firebug to do it, or some other opt-in, open source, unquestionable, there's no nefarious intentions here, where users in general around the world could opt in to having some amount of their web experience actually measured and offered up publicly, of course, anonymized. I think something that's important in looking at this data that doesn't always happen is making sure that it's possible to view the data in trends, to see what direction you're moving in, and of course to correlate that to events in your web development process. And the way that you communicate that is really important. I find so many times, and even companies do this, where these monitoring service companies do this, where you can go to a web page and see the stats, and people do that for the first week, they'll do that every day, and for the next couple of weeks, they'll do it once a week, and then they never go back to that site again. And so what we need better ways, basically just email alerts or something like that, to constantly keep this information in front of people and make them aware of their site speed. And then finally, we saw a couple examples with MS Fast. Aptimize talked about it a little bit. And in Lindsay's reflow talk, he showed the video about how pages paint. I think that really brings the point home. A picture says 1,000 words, so a video says 1,000,000 words. If you can show people their site actually rendering somewhere other than their office connection right next to the colo, and they can see how painful it is for the typical user, I think that brings the point home and brings a little more awareness. So then what to fix? Okay, I'm going to start going a little faster here. What to fix? So give me some view into how my page is loading. We have to be a little careful here. We would really like to be able to do this at a larger scale. And of course, we have this problem that I've hammered on a little bit, that we don't have a lot of visibility into the things that are actually taking the most time on the web, on our web pages. So we need to try to get some more tooling there. And then once we know what the slow parts are, what are we supposed to do to fix that? So these performance lint tools are a big help there. Again, we need to worry about sample size. And I think right now, most people are running tools like this in a development environment. And you might not always be, and I think, we heard some stories like Matt Muhlenweg talked before about a performance optimization they made that in a lab theoretical environment was going to have an impact, or did have an impact, and for users really didn't make much difference. So, what can we do there? And again, visibility into more parts of the page. And it's also interesting, when I started, my work in this area, there were more tools on the back end than the front end. And I think we've done a pretty good job of building some of these performance lint tools that are very easy to use. And I really feel like a YSlow for the back end would be really nice, like one that's focused on MySQL or Apache. I don't know how many times I see people building websites and they don't have some basic configuration, kind of no-brainers around these well-used back-end pieces of infrastructure. And if there was something that they could just run really quick that would tell them what to fix. Okay, so then how do we help prioritize the fix? And I'm really excited about this. This was something I hoped to accomplish at Velocity this year, and I think we did. You get into this debate about, how valuable is it to make this performance improvement? And then you offer up some number like, we made this performance improvement and whatever user goodness business metric had an increase, a lift of this much, and people immediately start, devil's advocate, being skeptical about that set. Well, didn't we roll out that performance improvement along with that new color of the button and this other new feature? And how could you really say it's because of the performance improvement? But when it's the other way around, like when we roll out some new color, button color, and people are excited about that, and with that change, we also roll out a performance improvement, and we see this lift, everyone's really excited to attribute that to the new button color. So, one thing I think that I talked about that's needed is to get companies like Microsoft to get up and offer up these stats that they have that show that performance really is statistically highly correlated to things like revenue, Google's stat about user experience and usage of their website, Shopzilla. I went back through Phil's slides and couldn't find an exact time, but they made those performance improvements to their site and saw up to a 12% lift in revenue and a 50% reduction in operating expenses with their servers. So I think that's going to help us in this WoW versus infrastructure debate, which we need to have. I mean, we don't want to, as much as I love performance, like I don't want to do performance for performance sake. The whole goal is to help the company, make the company profitable or the product successful, and help the user experience. So, but it's good to have these stats to help us in that debate. And then we also need to keep working with server developers, browser developers, with the standards committees to improve some of the technical constraints that we're bumping into. Okay, so BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. These are big, hairy, audacious problems when it comes to web performance. So single-threaded browsers. So Brad was just up here talking about that. Ben and Dion earlier today. Worker threads, Google Gears. That's true, but the level of difficulty as we start trying to taking advantage of some of these advanced techniques is really beyond most companies, except for the Googles and Facebooks and Yahoos out there. So that's a problem. We need to not only with blocking single-threaded JavaScript execution, but some of these other techniques that are being evangelized. It's just really too hard to build a high-performance website right now. So we need to address that. Connection speeds worldwide. If you have a worldwide audience, you're really dealing with those emerging markets where you have no reliability about connections. Don't even get me started talking about mobile. I think we all painfully are aware of that, even here. Ads we're going to beat up on in a minute. So I don't know about you, but when I finished that slide last night, late, I felt like a sad clown. And I'm Mr. Brightside, so I thought, that's kind of where I left at 1:30 in the morning. And so I got up this morning, it's like, okay, I really can't leave on that note, that's just not me. So things are getting better, right? So if we look over the 2 years, when I did that March 2007 with the first book, and I revisited that a few months ago. So we saw 2 years ago that the percentage of resources that were cacheable across the Alexa top 10, only 26% of them had a Far Future Expires header. Now we're at 93% across the Alexa across these websites here. How many of them were gzipping their CSS and JS? Only 5 out of 10 of these sites. Now it's 10 out of 10. How many of them were using sprites? 2 out of 10. Now it's 9 out of 10. How many of them were minifying their JavaScript? 4 out of 10, 9 out of 10. So we're getting traction at these big companies, and I would bet also at some of the medium-sized and smaller companies. So things are getting better there. I think certainly we're seeing more people here at Velocity, more exhibitors. So I think the talk of the word of web performance is getting out there. So don't give up. Buy locally, think globally. So optimize locally. I don't mean to focus on local optimizations. I mean, keep banging away on your site. I'm not going to list any bullets here. Run the Y-slows, run the page speeds, make the optimizations, buy my books. And so keep banging away. And I'm going to keep doing that too. But I've also been challenged by some of the folks at Google to realize that this is kind of incremental fixing, and we need some really, really big changes in how the web works and how web pages are served. So what are we going to do there? So I'm going to throw out some ideas, and I'll be honest with you, I still think these are maybe not an order of magnitude, but 80% smaller than they should be. So I think it'd be really cool if browsers cached, compiled, or JITted code. And even CSS, there must be some better version of those machine instructions that could be used over and over and over again. What about multi-part downloads? A way to, we really see that with persistent connections, that's a big benefit, and I think multi-part downloads would be even better. Prefetching and preferred caching. Preferred caching is, there are websites that I go to, literally, I go to 25 or 30 websites every single day of the week, or at least 5 or 6 days of the week. And I would like those to be always cached and prefetched. So, that's just kind of a browser improvement. And in Matt's talk, I talked about getting some infrastructure pieces, getting performance kind of built into those pieces of infrastructure, I think will help, because then all the individuals who who use those pieces of infrastructure don't have to implement the stuff themselves. And I kind of roll that into this fast by default. We just need to make things work the right way out of the box. It's just too much to have to make all these improvements and workarounds to our development process. And the internet infrastructure, again, globally, needs a lot of help. So until then, until we get all these things, we're going to have to grin and bear it. But keep a strong face and keep working on the things that you do control. But I urge everyone to be trying to think about how we really are going to achieve that goal of surfing the internet as fast as flipping through the pages of a magazine. All right, that's it. Thank you.